Our next round of snow is just hours away. Meteorologist Wyatt Everhart tracking how much we could get and breaking down the impact to your morning drive. Legislative Black Caucus members unveiled their 2024 priorities. We pressed them on why juvenile crime reform wasn't on the list. A city councilman says Baltimore is falling short on tackling quality of life crime.
I think it's a worthwhile policy, but if we're not actually doing it, we'll never know if it works.
We asked the mayor's office how they're overseeing enforcement. Plus, residents are becoming more fed up with the surge of violence citywide.
They need to get it together.
Though leaders argue crime is down.
People are constantly being almost gaslit.
Why a community leader says the talk is putting residents in more danger.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 10.
The wintry conditions are here to stay. Tonight, Fox 45 is tracking our next weather maker that could bring more snow overnight and into the weekend.
We are expecting up to 3 inches of snow in many spots across Maryland, and the system is coming as the Ravens get set for their first playoff game on Saturday. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mary Bubala.
And I'm Kai Jackson. Let's go right to meteorologist Wyatt Everhart for the very latest on this weather maker and its impact in the coming days. Wyatt?
Kai, Mary, we're definitely tracking the system already edging its way into Maryland and the mid-Atlantic. Now, no precipitation yet. We've got a few more dry hours out there, but back off to the west here, you see this low pressure area beginning to kind of get better organized. It's going to be dipping south and tracking eastward as we go into the early morning hours of Friday, and that's where we will have the problems, right? Slick roads, we're going to be below freezing as the system comes in tonight, and so that means everything that comes down will be sticking to any untreated surface, and that includes the sidewalks, the steps, and yes, all those secondary roads in particular. So this is what we're watching for, a significant sort of nuisance system, if you will. That winter weather advisory for Baltimore, D.C., the entire eastern and central part of Maryland, that's going to be up throughout the entire day on Friday. Again, several more dry hours, but we're below freezing as this snow begins to come in, so it'll all be sticking on that morning rush. We'll talk much more about the detailed impacts of the storm and the Arctic air coming in behind it for Saturday. That's all coming up.
All right, Wyatt, we can't wait to hear those details. Thank you. Several school systems have already called it and canceled classes for tomorrow. Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Carroll County, and Harford County schools are all closed tomorrow. Cecil County students will have a virtual learning day, and Howard County is dismissing 3 hours early tomorrow. Stay with Fox 45 on air and foxbaltimore.com as we continue to monitor any new closings or delays.
The State Highway Administration says it's ready to deal with the poor conditions, but drivers still need to prepare themselves for some slippery roads.
We understand a lot of folks have to go out and do things, so game plan is the big thing to do, is to never be in a hurry, always give yourself a lot of extra time.
AAA says it is best to stay home and stay off the roads if you can. But if you must go out and drive, drive slowly. You'll also want to increase your distance behind a car by 5 to 6 seconds, or at least 1 car length. And when you brake, do so slowly to reduce your risk of sliding on those slippery roads. We'll wake up tomorrow morning with our Fox 45 weather team as they continue to track the overnight snow and freezing temperatures. Meteorologist Amy Aronson has your full forecast starting at 4:30 a.m.
And we want to see the winter conditions in your neighborhood. Scan that QR code on your screen. That will take you to foxbaltimore.com, where you can upload pictures and videos, all powered by Stackler. In Annapolis, the Legislative Black Caucus is rolling out its priorities. In addition to education and health care access, lawmakers are looking at public safety. Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost was at the State House and has more on what caucus members hope to achieve.
There are several different areas of focus for the Legislative Black Caucus this session, but one thing is clear. The group says it is not interested in making any changes to the current juvenile justice laws. The first full week of session.
1, 2, 3, 4. Mic check. 1, 2.
Filled with priority announcements.
We're going to go ahead and get started.
Thursday morning, the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland out with their list. Expanding transportation services, health screenings, and housing access. Boosting black business opportunities. Preserving historically black college and university programs. And criminal justice policies. Like creating a correctional ombudsman within the state's Attorney General's office.
Will provide eyes and ears behind the walls.
Expanding expungement opportunities.
For far too long, we haven't allowed a sentence to be a sentence.
And unlike others pushing for juvenile justice changes,
this Black Caucus will protect our recent policies and laws related to the juvenile justice.
Right now, Maryland's juvenile justice laws are in the spotlight, like the Juvenile Justice Reform Act, preventing kids 13 and younger from facing certain misdemeanor charges, and the Juvenile Interrogation Act, requiring law enforcement to get permission from an attorney to question juveniles in custody, even if the parent agrees.
Does the caucus, does it support making changes to the Juvenile Interrogation Act?
The Legislative Black Caucus last year in the Maryland General Assembly passed really important foundational legislation to make sure that children in our communities are not interrogated without their constitutional rights of being able to ensure that they have access to an attorney.
Chair Janelle Wilkins, a Democrat from Montgomery County, adamant that her caucus does not want to see changes made.
I know that there's a proposal out there that would require a defense attorney to be in person during questioning of a minor as perhaps a compromise to some of the other pushes to make changes to the legislation. Would you support that?
In terms of that legislation, I appreciate you raising specific bills, but that's not on our Black Caucus agenda, which is what we are here discussing today.
That proposal brought forward by state's attorneys Ivan Bates of Baltimore City and Aisha Braveboy of Prince George's County. The two top prosecutors argue investigations are hindered by the limited opportunities to question young people, and having an attorney in person could help.
We'll take a look at every bill as it comes. Thank you.
Baltimore City Democrat Senator Jill Carter quick to throw cold water on that idea.
I don't really see where it makes any sense.
Another Bates Braveboy priority, taking the guessing out of the Department of Juvenile Services intake process, instead requiring young offenders to see a judge right away for certain charges to determine if the case will move forward.
Should all of these decisions go to the prosecutor? My answer is no. I think the department is equipped to make certain decisions about whether someone should be charged or informally adjusted.
Even if the intake officer isn't necessarily an attorney?
I think, honestly, I think we need to look at the qualifications and the process that's used. I think that we need to be clear that there is a trusted process in place. But if there is, I think that there's no reason that every single case be forwarded to the state's attorney.
Is that process adequate right now?
I don't know.
DJS already making changes to the intake process, at least in Baltimore City, where the former director was replaced following outcry from lawmakers after two young assault suspects were released from custody. But critics of the current system, like the state's attorney from Montgomery County,
is youth crime down? Not by any measure of anybody who's paying attention.
Argues there needs to be changes made to help drive down juvenile crime numbers this session.
One area where it does seem like there is growing support is ensuring the funding that is already going to DJS is being spent on programs that are seeing results. Now, whether that comes in the form of legislation or DJS policy is a question that has yet to be answered. In the State House, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
That brings us to our question of the day. Should the Legislative Black Caucus push for juvenile justice reform? 96% of those who voted say yes. You can make your voice heard by going to foxbaltimore.com/vote.
Also happening in Annapolis today, Governor Wes Moore signed two executive orders aimed at child poverty and youth crime. The first creates a governor's office for children. He says the office will continue to help address things like food insecurities, improve educational outcomes, healthcare access, and reduce child homelessness. The second order renames the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services to the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy. Governor Moore says this will offer a clearer and more focused effort when it comes to addressing juvenile crime. He says this office will collaborate with state and local leaders.
A core focus of the administration is both how are we increasing coordination between DJS, local law enforcement, et cetera, but also that the coordination can't begin when a young person is already in trouble. How do we actually have coordination that exists and take place really from cradle to career and beyond?
Fox 45 News asked Governor Moore about what types of programming will be funded through this new office. He says several different things could be funded, like lead abatement efforts and enrichment programs.
Coming up at 10:30, Fox 45's Jessica Babb will take a closer look at the governor's $63.1 billion budget, and the county is sounding the alarm over how the plan will be funded.
Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost will be in Annapolis following every step of this year's legislative session over the next 3 months. You can watch all of her coverage on air and online at foxbaltimore.com. We are following a developing story in Baltimore County where the principal of Pikesville High School was allegedly recorded making racially charged comments.
The school system says it's investigating the recording, which includes derogatory remarks about students and staff. But the principal's union is asking for a pause in any rush to judgment.
I seriously don't understand why I have to constantly put up with these dumb here every day. Between these ungrateful black kids who can't test their way out of a paper bag.
Well, the voice in that recording is allegedly Pikesville principal Eric Eisworth, seen here on the school's website. The 41-second clip includes derogatory comments you heard about black students and some school staffers, as well as members of the Jewish community. In an email to parents Wednesday afternoon, Baltimore County School Superintendent Dr. Miriam Rogers called the statements deeply disturbing, but said they cannot confirm the veracity of the recording. As the school system investigates, the principal's union is promising full cooperation.
In a statement to Project Baltimore, union leader Billy Burke writes, the outrageous language in the audio is not the language, thoughts, or character of Principal Eisworth. It goes on to say, quote, we ask that there be a pause in any rush to judgment and that we act respectfully to his family, staff, and to each other. The statement does not address previous reports indicating union leadership thought the recording may have been faked using artificial intelligence.
Fox 45 News will stay on this story as the investigation continues to evaluate the authenticity of this recording.
U.S. Attorney for Maryland Eric Barron says that he's ramping up his prosecution of repeat offenders, announcing the sentencing of 41-year-old Terrence Pevey. Pevey was convicted of selling drugs in Brooklyn homes last year and will spend 2 years in prison. Barron says this case is an example of the enhanced focus on repeat offenders. City and state leaders are backing legislation that would restrict early release time for some sexual assault offenders who earn good behavior credits. That bill is named after Pavel Lepere, the Baltimore Tech CEO who was murdered allegedly by a sexual assault offender last fall.
All of our extended families are victims. The employees of EcoMap Technologies, Pavel's friends and co-workers, and other members of the Baltimore tech community ecosystem are victims. The entire city of Baltimore was held hostage, and as a result is also a victim.
One example, one time is one time too many. We want to make sure that we put laws in place that will keep all the citizens protected.
Well, shootings and homicides were down across Baltimore in 2023, but some say quality of life crimes are still an issue. They argue City State's Attorney Ivan Bates' citation docket isn't being properly enforced. Fox 45's Vincent Hill joins us live with the concerns from one city council member about that citation docket. Vincent?
Yeah, Kai, so Councilmember Mark Conway wants what most people in Baltimore say they want: more numbers when it comes to low-level citations.
As temperatures remain below freezing.
Frustrated because of the same things. Nothing has been changed. We need to have a change.
Frustrations on the streets of Baltimore heating up.
Everything is going on. Prostitution, drug dealing, you name it.
6 months after City State's Attorney Ivan Bates' citation docket took effect, its effectiveness still unknown.
So we want to see, obviously, the number of citations.
Councilman Mark Conway, chair of the Public Safety Committee, calling for an oversight hearing.
And we understood that they were saying there were some interactions, but they didn't necessarily result in citations.
Conway is hoping the next conversation echoes what residents are saying.
So we'd want them to be reflective of what we are hearing on the streets.
Meanwhile, former Mayor Sheila Dixon.
And I would give the mandate to the police commissioner and those individuals in leadership that we want to see this implemented right away.
Saying the enforcement of the citations starts from the top down.
And I would bring them back week by week, month by month to track to find out how this process is going.
Fox 45 reached out to Mayor Scott's office asking the following. As part of the mayor's meeting with BPD leadership, are the number of citations issued part of that discussion? What is the mayor's directive to BPD leadership regarding enforcement? In a statement, the mayor's office responded saying in part, Mayor Scott and BPD leadership discuss numerous public safety topics, and occasionally the topic of citations is included. There are no special directive in regards to the issuance of citations. Meanwhile,
if folks are complaining about certain issues,
a lot of questions on if the policy is actually working.
And we're not seeing any citations or interactions around those issues, I have a real question whether or not we're actually engaging in the policy.
And meanwhile, on yesterday, we did reach out to district court to find out how many citations have been issued since July when the citation docket started. So far, we have not yet got that information. Reporting live at City Hall, Vincent Hill, Fox 45 News.
Vincent, thank you. Coming up on Fox 45 News at 10, Baltimore residents voicing frustration over crime in their neighborhoods. Why one expert says city leaders need to be paying closer attention to those comments. A Maryland private school organization preparing to host a student conference on gender identity and sexuality. Why some say the conference is pushing an agenda as school leaders defend its importance. And we're continuing to track our next weather maker, bringing snow to our area overnight, how it could impact your morning commute, and the potential impact on Saturday's Ravens playoff game. We'll be right back.
Next month, local private school students and teachers can voluntarily attend a conference discussing LGBTQ plus topics in schools and how to navigate those conversations.
Fox 45 Jeff Abel shares the concerns from some parental advocates as school leaders say it's an important topic to discuss.
The conference is open to hundreds of students who attend any number of private schools in this state, but it is the topic that has some critics shaking their heads.
At St. Paul School next month, there's a conference tackling questions which some parents say schools have no business tackling.
When you have teachers, when you have schools who are focusing on this more than they're focusing on getting kids back on track, that is a huge problem.
The school will host a gender and sexual identity conference and will be open to middle and upper school students at Maryland's private schools. Its agenda is still unclear, but in a letter to parents, administrators at St. Paul's called it an affinity space where students who identify as LGBTQ and their allies can share community, support one another, and discuss ways to forge more inclusive school environments.
It is deeply disturbing to see school after school and district after district
prioritize pushing an agenda over actually educating their students.
Those are conversations that should be happening at home with parents. Schools are not in charge of driving these conversations.
The conference was first questioned on social media this week, and reaction was swift. It's a cult, wrote one reader. Insanity, wrote another. But another reader wrote, they are private schools. Why do you care?
Parents have to be careful. They have to be involved. They have to know what's going on. They have to know what their school is pushing. And that is regardless if you send your kids to a private school, a charter school, a public school.
Well, fortunately, at least taxpayer dollars aren't going to this. It's still not what's best for kids. It's still not what families want.
This is an annual conference which organizers say sells out to capacity each year. Jeff Abel, Fox 45 News.
A woman beaten with a gun so severely, investigators say it caused the weapon to fire. I'm Alexa Ashwell. The search for this man, that's tonight on Maryland's Most Wanted.
And on the weather side of the equation, we've got active weather on the march after a quiet day. Yes, new snow system headed in for our Friday. Temperatures now generally below freezing in all but the city and in the state capital. So these air temps continue to drop as snow continues to move in. It's all a recipe for a slick morning around here. We'll get more details on the storm coming up.
And as we go to break, we're taking a live look over Towson. I think I say this almost every week. It is the calm before the storm because we've had lots of activity, rain and snow. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Let's go live to Washington, D.C., where the House and Senate have passed a short-term funding bill to avoid a government shutdown. The bill keeps the government funded through early March. It is the third extension as budget talks continue to stall on both sides. The bill now heads to President Biden's desk for approval.
Hunter Biden has agreed to testify before House Republicans in a closed-door hearing on February 28th, which is what Republicans have wanted for some time. It's a reversal from Biden's previous stance, excuse me, saying that he only would testify publicly, while the House Oversight Committee is investigating Hunter Biden's foreign business deals and any potential influence from his father, President Joe Biden. The Biden family denies any wrongdoing.
Well, the head of one of America's largest banks has a warning for President Biden.
Yeah, that leader says that negative talk about Trump supporters could hurt Biden's bid for re-election. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins has the story.
As political and business elites gather in Davos, Switzerland for the annual World Economic Forum, attention zeroing in on events with global impact, like the 2024 U.S. presidential election. JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon sharing some pointed advice.
I wish the Democrats would think a little more carefully when they talk about MAGA.
Warning this type of harsh criticism of MAGA Republicans by the left.
MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law.
That's dominated party rhetoric since the 2016 cycle could hurt Democrats this go around.
You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic.
I mean, really? Could we just stop that stuff and actually grow up and treat other people with respect?
Dimon arguing it's incorrect to say Trump supporters share his polarizing character, pointing out Trump's policy successes add to his political popularity.
He was kind of right about NATO, kind of right about immigration. He grew the economy quite well.
China virus.
Tax reform worked. He was right about some of China.
Towson University professor emeritus Richard Vatz points out Dimon identifies as a centrist Democrat, and the advice he's giving Biden is sound.
So start emphasizing why we should vote for you on policy issues that will win you some votes. Don't keep harping on how bad the people are who support Donald Trump, because this is an ever-increasing number of people who are concerned about the country.
This comes as data from a new January ABC Ipsos poll shows those who approve of Biden sank to just 33%. That's not only the lowest point for his presidency, but it's a record low for any president in the last 15 years. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
And that brings us to our national question of the day. Who do you trust more on the issues that matter to you, President Biden or former President Donald Trump? So far, 91% of those who voted said Trump. To weigh in, head to foxbaltimore.com/vote. Click on the Pulse tab.
The results are in for Wednesday's question of the day. We asked, what issue is most important to you in the upcoming election? 47% said immigration, 39% said the economy, 6% said foreign policy, 8% said crime.
Still ahead, Governor Moore unveils his budget proposal, but many big-ticket items are still unfunded. Fox 45 News taking a closer look at the potential impact.
Fox 45 continues to hear from residents who say enough is enough when it comes to crime in their neighborhoods. Their message for lawmakers.
We are following three big stories at 10:30. Governor Wes Moore unveiled his budget proposal earlier this week, but many big ticket items are still unfunded. The questions coming from county leaders tonight about how they'll be paid for.
Sheriffs from across the state are endorsing a Republican Senate candidate, but will that move the needle on Election Day? We take a closer look at John Teichert's chances.
And from car thefts to gun violence, Fox 45 continues to hear frustrations from residents across the city who say enough is enough when it comes to crime in their neighborhoods.
Man, I think it's ridiculous out here, man. People work hard for their money.
What is happening is that people are getting more and more fed up.
Baltimoreans hope their message begins to resonate at City Hall.
Fox 45's Keith Daniels joins us live with a look at those concerns and why some say lawmakers need to listen. Keith?
Kai and Mary, well, when you talk about certain issues and you take the pulse of the people, sometimes what they say is piercing. And tonight, the voice of one Baltimore man is unforgettable. Crime scenes in Baltimore City. One of the latest, a 22-year-old man shot in Southeast Baltimore just before 1 o'clock Thursday morning. Tuesday night, a 17-year-old boy shot in the face on Harwell Avenue near Erdman Avenue in East Baltimore. The boy survived, the shooter on the loose. City residents' voices
gotta be tough on crime.
Still resonating from shootings, carjackings to stolen vehicles. And the juveniles involved faces of frustration this week and their concerned voices unforgettable. One of the loudest voices recently.
Man, I think it's ridiculous out here, man. People work hard for their money.
Vincent Allen, a Baltimore man who seemingly dares someone to try to steal his vehicle.
I'm not worried about nobody. Come and try to steal my car. You gonna have something for you. I'm 49 years old. I work hard for my little piece of crap. I be damn one of these little kids come and try to steal my cars. I'm gonna give them something they could get still. I'm not playing that. People work hard for their cars.
Tonight, Eurypsy Morgan.
What is happening is that people are getting more and more fed up.
Spokesperson for the community group Peace on why the frustrated voices and who should be listening, notably city leaders.
This is something that all of us can understand. When you work hard for something, whether it's a vehicle or, a bag of chips, it's your hard-earned time and money. And the fact that any politician would disregard that as simply, quality of life or just an issue that they shouldn't be concerned about, they do that at their own peril.
These kids going around stealing people's cars. How would they like it somebody steal their parents' cars? Y'all won't like it at all.
Well, the voice of Vincent. We're live tonight. Keith Daniels, Fox 45 News.
Keith, thank you. Baltimore City Councilman Antonio Glover takes issue with the response to juvenile crime in his district after a 17-year-old was shot in the face this week. That shooting happened near Bel Air Edison Safe Street site, part of Baltimore's flagship violence prevention program. The location shut down in October amid an FBI investigation into several staffers.
We're putting monies into programming that are not working. The programs that are working are the men and women that are inside of these communities. You could take a horse to a well, you can't make them drink it. We need all hands on deck.
Glover says Safe Streets hasn't been transparent about how its employees are vetted or how they're monitored once hired. The councilman has called for a halt in funding until the mayor's office provides clarification.
The man convicted of killing a Morgan State University security guard in August of 22 is sentenced to 40 years in prison. Chase Wilson was a student at Morgan State at the time of the murder. Police say he shot 19-year-old Julian Frew in the head while Frew was patrolling a housing complex near campus. City State's Attorney Ivan Bates says he hopes the sentencing brings closure for the victim's family.
Lawmakers are trying to finalize the governor's budget proposal and avoid a massive deficit. Governor Moore says he's focusing on the future, promising to fully fund the state's blueprint for education, known as the Kerwin Plan. The governor also announced $1.8 million for small business innovation research and a $500,000 for the Pavel Lepere Innovation Acceleration Grant Program.
The governor's budget comes in at just over $63 billion for fiscal year 25, which he says shrinks the state's structural deficit without raising taxes. But with many big ticket items still on the table, Fox 45's Jessica Babb talks with county leaders who are asking how they'll get funded.
Happy Budget Day.
With a new budget announced,
We will achieve each of these goals without raising taxes on Marylanders.
and Maryland facing a daunting deficit.
This budget shrinks the structural deficit by 34%.
There are some tough decisions and challenges ahead.
There's key questions about how Governor Wes Moore's proposal will get paid for.
The funding sources are disappearing.
My major concern is to ensure that we are not passing the buck to the counties long term to carry too much of the burden that we can't sustain or afford.
Andrew Friedson, Montgomery County's council president, says with $3.3 billion in cuts to the Department of Transportation, it was going to cost them big in the county.
Included in those cuts, among others, was over $17 million in cuts to local bus service. Our local ride-on bus service serves some of our most vulnerable residents.
But since Governor Moore has announced a one-time, one-year solution of taking $150 million from the state's rainy day fund to offset some of those costs.
Well, it stops the bleeding, certainly. It's kind of like sending an ambulance to stabilize the patient.
But now the clock is ticking with the next challenge of sustainability, with the need for long-term solutions.
A punt on the difficult conversations on that expensive wish list of projects that do not have funding sources, punting those difficult conversations to next year.
And it's not just transportation. There's other big ticket items that will cost billions, from $1 billion in clean energy initiatives, $3 billion on the Red Line project, and $3.8 billion on the Kirwan Commission and education reform.
We're struggling with Kirwan.
It was a gut punch. We need the state to step up to help us to fund it. And we need to make sure that we are doing it in a way that doesn't fall back on the historical challenges we have faced, that when state challenges occur, they lean on the counties to solve them.
There's other initiatives in Governor Moore's budget, including $127 million in funding for local law enforcement agencies, $115 million to address housing needs, and $270 million for the child care scholarship, among many others. When the bills come due, the burden could still be on taxpayers.
These burdens that are passed along to the county do not free our residents from the burdens to pay for them.
Jessica Babb, Fox 45 News.
Well, the state's rainy day fund sits at $2.3 billion within the recommended savings level. Governor Moore says he's pulling $150 million to help offset a transportation deficit, despite a warning from former Governor Larry Hogan as he left office.
It would be a mistake for the legislature to use its newly expanded budgetary power to return to the old habits of raiding the rainy day fund or recklessly spending down the surplus.
Governor Moore says dipping into the rainy day fund won't be a pattern. Yesterday, we asked you, with a looming budget deficit, what should lawmakers do? 94% of those who voted believe lawmakers should shrink government rather than raise taxes.
The race for Maryland's open U.S. Senate seat, one Republican candidate is calling public safety his top priority. Today, retired Air Force General John Teichert launched a law enforcement coalition made up of several sheriffs from around the state. Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor has more on who's involved and what political experts are saying about the endorsement.
Yet today, Teichert securing the support of 4 county sheriffs with a promise to push tough on crime priorities in D.C. Political analyst John Dede says it's a promise that he has heard Maryland voters calling for, but he questions whether it will be enough to win over a historically Democratic state.
I wanted them to know that I trusted them, that I appreciated them, and that ultimately I fully supported them.
A group of Maryland sheriffs from Talbot, Worcester, Wicomico, and Dorchester County banding together to back John Teichert for U.S. Senate, as Teichert mutually pledges to back the blue.
Unfortunately, here in Maryland and in many places around our country, our politicians, including my opponents, are saying just the opposite. And as a result, we see these pro-criminal policies that ultimately degrade law and order in our communities.
Pointing specifically to the state's controversial juvenile justice reform laws.
It has increased the juvenile crime rate. It has emboldened juveniles.
and we need leadership.
Worcester County Sheriff Matthew Crisafulli says electing a candidate who understands the current challenges facing local law enforcement is crucial. And as a retired Air Force general, Crisafulli believes Teichert's military background makes him the best man for the job.
General Teichert epitomizes leadership. He's been on the front lines.
This year's Maryland General Assembly issue, that's the number one thing they're talking about, that they want to deal with that problem quickly.
According to political analyst John Deedy, a promise to prioritize public safety will resonate with voters. However,
the problem is this is a national election for the United States Senate, and we are a polarized country politically in Washington. Electing him to the Senate makes Mitch McConnell the majority leader. Also, Maryland is a strong Democratic state.
Among the candidates running for the Democratic nomination, Teichert also facing some stiff competition between Representative David Trone and Prince George's County Executive Angela Alsobrooks.
David Trone will be able to, if he's the nominee, will be able to spend him to death. If it's Angela Alsobrooks, she's got the political establishment behind her.
Deedy calling the chances of any Republican winning this election an uphill battle.
They have the demographics against them. The last time a Republican was elected to the United States Senate from Maryland was in 1980.
But Teichert remaining confident in his belief Maryland voters are hungry for change.
They are understanding that conservatives have the message that they need to make their lives and communities better, and it can only be brought about by leaders, not by politicians.
Ultimately, time will tell what voters decide. Maryland's primary election is scheduled for May 14th and the general election November 5th. In the control room, Rebecca Pryor, Fox 45 News.
A brazen attack as a Baltimore woman returns from Christmas shopping. How the victim knows her suspected attacker and the efforts to track him down ahead on Maryland's Most Wanted.